Welcome back to Byte into Future. So we just finished one exciting conversation, and then I can't wait to talk to my friend, David. David is my ski buddy and also entrepreneur. He has been an entrepreneur since age 13. I can't wait to have this conversation. Thank you for coming by.
Hey, thank you for having me, Howie. Really pumped.
Yeah, this is a great space. So, starting from age 13, you have been an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so kind of what my story and how I got to what we're building at Lantern is, I started my first SaaS company when I was 13. At the time, I was really into sneakers. So these limited edition Kanye Nike shoes, they'd sell out within 3 minutes of going online.
Okay.
So every Sunday I tried to buy these sneakers, I'd miss them. So what I started to do is I started to create these bots that would actually go online and quickly add them to cart for you. So I created the first sneaker e-commerce automation platform. I did that for sneakers, Kylie Jenner lip kits, SoulCycle classes, even baby clothing. Like anything you could build online, I was actually selling it too.
So I have two questions. One is, can you give that script to me? Just kidding. But you kind of jokingly said in the past that at age 13, 14, you already made more money than your teachers was able to make, right? So why not doing that all the way? And then, what made you to do something different?
Yes, it's I love doing that. We're doing over 70K ARR at 13. But really, at that time, then after that, I wanted to become a competitive rower. So I was on the U19 national team for that, rowed in college, and then ultimately what I got into right now was I was at a cybersecurity company called Menlo Security. I was pretty early there, and while I was there, I started spending a lot of time working with our revenue team. And while I was there, we had a really issue where we couldn't figure out exactly a single view of all of our customers. So we had all of this customer data kind of scattered between 30 different tools we're using, and then the marketing people and the sales people and success people, they were all looking at different views. There wasn't one unified record of the customer. So I worked to solve that for our team and got really obsessed about this problem. And then kind of how this led to what we ended up doing at Lantern was once I started saying, all right, this is obviously an issue with customer data. It turns out that the issue went far past the data. The issue was actually, hey, why do we have these 30-point solutions? Since if you think about the last 20 years of software, right, we start with on-prem systems, and then we start lifting them to the cloud.
Salesforce and so on and so on.
Yeah, and the conventional wisdom of is we should have 30+ point solutions, and these solutions should be really narrow. And the reason why teams of all sizes bought these narrow point solutions is it was the easiest way to go to the cloud, right? You had on-prem systems. It's really crazy to buy one giant cloud solution. So let's just buy one narrow thing that did a part of the on-prem system. And then that was the last 20 years of software. We're now in kind of the hangover of the era where we see that, we obviously saw the revenue teams. They're using 30+ different point solutions, and it ends up wasting their reps' time since they're spending time switching between all these tools, ends up scattering this valuable customer data kind of all across the cloud, and it makes it just really difficult to create great customer experience.
So for me to digest a little bit. So you were a engineer at Menlo Security.
Yeah.
You were working on the revenue team already at the time.
Yeah, so I started actually as a data analyst first, and then what happened is
to analyze their data.
Yeah, and I just got brought into the revenue team since we needed to figure out how to better forecast and also how to grow revenue faster.
So in many ways, you started a Lantern to solve your own problem back in from your Menlo Security days.
You nailed it. Exactly what it is, right?
So maybe I could have guessed it. Why is the name Lantern?
Yeah. So basically, the name that we have Lantern is we try to help you illuminate the customer journey. So the idea is that right now you're swimming around in the dark. You don't know what your customers are doing at all times. You don't know how best to apply AI to give them a better experience. The idea is you get Lantern, we help light the way to better customer outcomes.
Okay, let me challenge you a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
Most people use Salesforce, right? All my data is in the Salesforce. Salesforce has all the data. They give you some insights. Why you need another startup doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that people don't understand about Salesforce, obviously great company, great business, most of your customer data doesn't actually get into Salesforce. About 75% of your customer data lives outside of their Sales Cloud today. And the reason because of that...
Give me some examples.
Yeah, totally. So some examples of that is call recordings, emails, calendars, product analytics.
Okay.
The reality is most of your sales data is unstructured. Because think about sales conversations, they happen between people, and it's relationships, and all of that can't be fit into nice columns. So that's what happens, and that's the real innovation with AI. Since now we have all these unstructured sales data, we can actually start to unify it and put a nice structure and get it into kind of this next generation system.
So basically, for the customers, for a vendor to understand the customer journey, there's so much data in Salesforce, but so much data outside of Salesforce as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned 75% outside.
Yeah.
So like that's the call transcripts, some meeting calendars, all that sort of things. So from that point of view, you are saying that you are first aggregating all the data together, and then you illuminate that for the customers.
Exactly, you nailed it. Since we have all this data, right, the call transcript, product analytics, it's all unstructured, all outside of our Sales Cloud. So the first thing we want to do when we think about how do we build these next generation intelligent systems, we can't be intelligent without knowing every single piece of information about the customer. So like we aggregate and unify all that data into a single record. Then we apply AI insights. And then kind of the part we can go in a bit later is we're actually trying to bundle more tools later on.
So in terms of the volume of the work or the complexity of the work,
yeah,
this aggregation, collecting, ingesting the data is is tougher, or the AI intelligence is tougher?
The reality is it's all really hard. Like it's a very hard problem to solve.
Both.
Both are very hard problems to solve. Not a great answer for you, but if we think about the complexity of the system, there's so many different tools that teams are using. Like just for, let's say, we want to ingest your support data and use LLMs to summarize all of the problems that your customers are having, as well as talk to kind of our customer base as a whole. There's over 25 different major support desks, and you have to make sure you integrate with all of them and then unify that schema for across our customer base. And that's just the support data type. So like, as a result, we have over 50 integrations to everything that you need to run your revenue team.
By the way, how many people in the company?
Yeah, so we're really small right now. We're still about 15 folks.
So with that, 50 or 5?
One five.
So 15 people, you need to integrate with dozens of these systems.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, right? I mean, and it's not just one-time integration. It's also maintaining it. What if the APIs change,
yeah,
right? That's a lot of work. By the way, do you think AI is helping you to make that integration far better, or maybe in the future not quite yet?
Yeah, AI is the reason we're actually able to build this with such a lean team. One of the really interesting things is we built these frameworks where we can actually, internal tools, we ingest these API documentation, and then we can actually generate these integrations pretty quickly. So like it's mostly automated.
So you are using AI for the integration already, right? You're sort of using some AI bots, you develop your own AI bots to understand the API documents and then do the program. So in some ways, right, you probably saw Devon, the demo. You're already doing some Devon stuff, inside the company.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of the Devon stuff. Like, ironically, we're doing probably my old job. We've mostly automated what I used to do.
How much saving do you see?
Yeah, we see savings all across. In terms of just headcount, we're saving hundreds of man hours of unifying the data, resolving all the entities.
So let me ask you a question. With and without AI, right? So with AI, 15 people. Without AI, without the kind of things you were talking about, how many people you would have?
Oh, I mean, we'd have to be at least over 50. Like this company would not, maybe 75, this company would not have been possibly built 2 or 3 years ago.
When did you start a company?
Yes, we started the company about 2.5 years ago.
And then that's before the ChatGPT moment. So why you think, why you thought at the time the AI could help you that much at the time?
Yeah, so we were one of the first people on the GPT-3 beta.
And once
I saw that, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It seemed like magic. The only issue and kind of the biggest bet that we made at the time of GPT-3 is the context windows were too small.
What was the context window at the time?
So at the time, the context window was a couple thousand tokens. So we think about, like, for the non-technical people listening, we could only, let's say, ingest 3 emails into it. So that, and one of the bets that we took, we kind of risked the entire company on, was over the next couple years, we're going to see these get much larger, so we could actually fit in lots of our customer data.
How many emails can you ingest at a time now?
Now we can just, every single communication you've had with a customer, right? You can just think about, maybe 3 Bibles worth of emails right now. So it's a lot of volume. And that's the other part, is we can now actually extract the insights too. Since before, when you could only ingest one email, you couldn't get the full view of the customer. But now that we have this nicely unified schema, we can actually just put that all into the context window and get really meaningful
And
insights.
then you are doing RAG, retrieval augmented generation, before the term was popular, I'm assuming.
Yes, we're doing RAG before it's popular. We also do a lot of things that are pretty unique, where we have this concept of like AI inferred columns. Back to like our support desk example, like turns out you don't actually really care about like the signee or the status of the ticket. You need AI generated columns like what's the summary of this ticket? What's the problem that people are having? You know, how are they interacting with our team? And you need this for every single data source that goes into your revenue team, from a call recording to how someone's using your products, you know, on the phone, all of that. So it's not only unifying the data, but it's also going one step further and saying, what does this mean in the context of the customer journey?
Wow, that's kind of interesting. So we talked a lot about the data collection, integration with different systems. Now let's talk about the AI intelligence, right? You just mentioned about using GPT-3 before it was popular. Where, you know, from your point of view, like, are you badly waiting for GPT-5, or you feel like you can get so much done even with GPT-4 already? What's your sense?
Yes, this might be a bit contrarian. I think we have another, across the industry, at least 10 years of building just with GPT-4. Like GPT-5 would be great, but we've barely scratched the surface in what's possible with intelligent systems. There's two parts, to making intelligence. The first part is obviously the reasoning engine, which you see in GPT-4, and the reasoning will get better and better. But the second part that people neglect is actually giving the context to the agent to figure out what to do correctly. Since the reality is,
give me an example.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, with a full view of context, it's much easier to solve problems. So let's say we're trying to think about one of our customers, and we're not sure what the next best step to take is inside a deal. But it turns out that once we start figuring out, all right, this is all of the call recordings of how they've spoken to us. Let's look at how they've actually used our product and their analytics. Let's figure out the support tickets, the cadence, the sentiment. Turns out once we actually have all that in one spot, the data tells a very nice story, and it's actually not that hard to figure out what to do next. The hard part is just getting all the data in one spot, but you don't actually have to be that intelligent to figure out what's the insight to take from that once all the data is gathered.
For instance, what's an example of the next step?
Yeah, so like a good example for a next step is, let's say the next step has to be, okay, based on the way the customer is talking to our team and using our product, we actually have an opportunity to upsell them. So what we should do is we should have a salesperson reach out, and we have, we sell 7 different products, but based on the data, we think product number 3 is the one to sell to them.
Interesting. So you're saying that basically the insights you are getting, you don't stop at the insights level, you also give the action, right? You tell people what to do next, so that maybe you even automated that next step, so that the revenue just, money just comes in automatically.
Right, like one of the things we're really bullish on that I love talking about is the idea of a coaching network. So what that means, like those not familiar, is we want to turn all of your reps into superheroes. The kind of main problem we have in sales and revenue teams is we have top performers, the top 25% of the team absolutely killing it. They're closing a lot of deals, and we want to figure out how do we clone those people. Like if we could figure out how to make everyone look like our top performer, our business would do much better. So that's where AI comes in. We can see these are the behaviors and the interactions that our top performer does, and then we can say, okay, as an AI, I recommend everyone else should do these 3 steps, since this is what our top performer would do. And then the system gets much smarter over time. So as we're going through here, we say, okay, this is what the AI thinks I should do. We track the outcome. If the outcome's successful, we reinforce it back in. We say we should do this a second time. If the AI recommendation didn't go well, we also track that too. And we say, all right, that was actually a mistake. Let's not make that recommendation again.
Okay, so far I think you articulated it very well, right? You gather lots of different data of a customer journey, so that you can have insights and then you make recommendations. Let me ask you a difficult question though, right? You are not the only one telling that story, right? The sales tech is a very crowded space. Almost everyone, I wouldn't say they sell the same story, but sell a piece of the story, right? There are gazillion of How do you rise above the noise? And then, you come to NYSE, let's say they are your customers or whatnot. Why do they believe you have it? And then, how do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. especially since obviously we're a small team. Like, how do you get these public companies that are working with us to trust us when it's just 12 people in a room in San Francisco? So the main answer to that is we've taken a very different approach to kind of everyone in the industry. Basically, there's two ways to make money on the internet, obviously. Either bundle or unbundle. And I think right now we see across areas like cybersecurity, we see Wiz announcing they're starting to bundle there. In HR, we see Rippling. There hasn't actually been a real attempt to bundle in sales yet. And one of the reasons that no one's been able to do it is since all the data has been unstructured until now. So we're the first people to take this data first approach, which is obviously what we've been speaking about, of we're gonna use LLMs to structure all of your sales data. And then the strategy then becomes, we're actually gonna start to then bundle in those 30 tools you buy after Salesforce. So we're gonna go incredibly wide, and one of the benefits of going wide is you unlock these new kind of islands of product market fit, as well as these new use cases. Like, for example, right now, your data in bugs, like say your Datadog, is not connected to your sales data. But the reality is when we connect those two together in Lantern's cloud, we can unlock net new use cases like, I want to triage all my customer bugs by ACV, and our engineering team should prioritize our largest customers first.
Yep.
Now, that's obvious. We should be doing that,
Yep.
but because the data is all scattered, we can't. So basically our theory and the thesis behind Lantern is sales tech's going to consolidate. And the way to win is to build a fully integrated platform that's data first. And when we see what's happening in the market is, you see large public companies like ZoomInfo, they too agree that things are consolidate. But instead, their way to consolidate is just to start buying up other companies, but those tools won't be integrated. So the bet becomes, we'll see this play out over the next 5 years as we go into this platform shift, which wins? Data first and building everything from scratch, fully integrated, nail the product experience, or just use your distribution, try to buy a couple companies, and just have one salesperson try to cram a lot of product down their throats.
So you're competing with ZoomInfo.
At the end of the day, there's going to be one mega vendor for sales. So like we want to compete with ZoomInfo, Salesforce, and all of the big guys out there.
And then ZoomInfo just had an earning, it wasn't fantastic,
Yeah.
right? The revenue year over year is decreasing. And then you feel like the reason for that is there are startups like you, making them the trouble?
Yeah, I think what happens is when you have a stagnant product, it's a great company, great folks over there.
Yep.
What you see wrong is that the strategy for acquisitions. When you start to acquire, at some scale in SaaS, you need to go multi-product. We see that kind of all market leaders. The way to go multi-product is you need to build it internally. When you try to acquire through acquisition, you end up with kind of this Frankenstein suite where you have these separate sales teams and separate products that don't fully talk to each other. And it ends up actually creating more friction for customers. Like you try to sell this unified vision, but ultimately ends up with a worse customer experience. And what you see when your revenue starts to slow, people realize that and they start looking to new solutions.
So I get it, right? You wanted to aggregate lots of the data, not just the one angle, a little bit more like a broader platform so that it's comprehensive. In some ways, I can see the value of it. But I would still challenge you a little bit because, as a startup, typically people still go with pretty narrow wedge and then say, hey, I'm doing this 10 times better than other people, rather than I do everything, better. What is your wedge?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our wedge product, it's kind of like a microcosm of our entire thesis. We call it signal-based selling. So what that means for us is there are a lot of signals in the market. Basically, across everything in the industry, we see that CAC, the cost to acquire a customer, it goes up every single year. It's getting more expensive to get folks. The second thing we see happening is cold emails, like trying to reach out to people. It's never been harder to get someone's attention. Less than 1% replies. So what we help you prioritize is how do we find the 3% of the market that's looking to buy right now, how we make sure our reps are spending time reaching out to them and try and make them aware of our product. So what we do is we aggregate all these signals. We de-anonymize web traffic going to your website, folks switching jobs, intent, hirings, firings, SEC filings, even anything in the news. And then what we do is we route those to your team and we try to figure out who's in the market to buy, as well as making sure that the correct rep can then reach out to them.
So quality leads are the wedge for you
Correct.
To get into the customer.
Now, the wedge is how do we help you grow your revenue faster and speak to the best people in the
And
market.
once I say, hey, I like the leads you bring in, I already married to your platform, and then you give me other workflow to speed up my sales or revenue growth, that sort of things.
You got it. Since to give you quality leads, we need to know who are your best customers. That's how we can actually use AI to figure out who the next ones to talk to are. So we ingest all of your data in that to give you better recommendations. And once we've done that, we have all your data. We're already giving you leads. It's very easy for us to expand in kind of our next other products to help you unify your entire revenue team in one spot.
So David, the one thing you mentioned a few minutes ago, I totally agree with you, right? I think you said there's still a lot of things you can leverage out of the GPT-4. You are not like, hey, GPT-5, give it to me, otherwise I'm toast. You are not on that camp, right? You are telling the world that even for GPT-4, I can, squeeze so much value out of it already. I totally agree with you on that. I think a lot of times, especially for enterprise product, the bottleneck is not necessarily even the technology, but things around the technology, right? The process, people, culture, kind of things. So I totally see that. But I still wanted to push you on one thing, which is, sure, everyone, GPT-4 is open to everyone. I can start a company tomorrow, using some AI, integrating all the systems. What is the moat? I'm pretty sure there is some moat, but can you articulate your moat a little bit more?
Yeah. So our moat is twofold. Obviously, the interesting thing about going wide and having this full product is that you have some real gravity there. Once you've actually ingested all this data and unified it, and we have people using it every day, it becomes much, much easier to move more workflows into Lantern. So one of the cool things we see is that we have the average customer using about 15 different workflows, and they add about 3 a month. So see that they keep growing and growing these workflows. The idea being that once you have all your data there, it's very easy to figure out how to add more stuff there. The other thing you see with a moat.
Meaning that it's a networking effect, so would you say that?
Yeah,
or?
You get some real network effects because you have your team using there, and once they start to collaborate, it becomes much easier to add an additional SKU that we sell versus go to another vendor. So a good example of this is we just expanded one of our customers' flat file. They came in on that wedge product. They said, hey, we need to figure out how to generate more leads. We helped them with that. And then later on, their success team came saying, we want to figure out how to better retain and expand our existing customers. So what we're able to do with that data, since we already had all their customer data, we actually spun up an org for them where they could go in, they saw all of the customers that are ready to churn or maybe need some more love from them, and they could have that, as well as all the customers that are ready to expand. And they spent some time talking to those too. And that was just within a 10-day free trial. Since we have all the data there, it becomes so easy to adopt new technology, the friction's reduced, and there's no time to onboard these additional solutions since you already know the UI and your team's already spending a couple hours a day on the platform.
So basically, that's still the platform strategy in a way, right?
Yeah.
So once you are on my platform, you get a benefit from, the wedge.
Yeah.
I offer you a wide spectrum of other features, right? You can benefit from that. Is that the primary thing? You feel like this is my moat, once people marry to my, wedge, they are going to marry the entire family.
Yeah, I think that, and there's also legitimate data moat too. Since one of the interesting things about us is we have a full view of the customer. Since we're connected to every single downstream system, and now once you start using our platform, we also generate a lot of first-party data for how you're interacting with customers through us. And that lets us fine-tune models to give better recommendations, as well as because we're talking about those coaching networks earlier, we're constantly adding the actions you're taking in our platform to make your AI smarter. Ultimately, we have a really big data moat as well.
That's coaching a new salesperson, for instance, to make him a superhero faster, right? That's very interesting. So those are the kind of still from product point of view.
Yeah.
What about from technology point of view? You feel like, hey, I have such a thing, it needs, just because you have 2 Stanford graduates, that's not enough. It's not enough to replicate what I'm doing. So what kind of thing do you have for that sort of things? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so listen, this is a really hard company to build. There's a big technical moat in terms of what you have to build. Just to get the first version, we went heads down with a large engineering team for basically 2 years to get built. Since you have to build a data company first to get all the data in one spot, then you have to build an AI company to figure out how to get the insights, and then you have to build an application layer SaaS company to actually deliver those to customers.
So you have to build a data company, and then you build an AI company, and then you build a SaaS companies. So it's a very big undertaking, and then you only have 12, 15 people.
Yeah.
So you have to leverage AI, otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it.
It would be impossible to do it. And The reality is it's just very hard. Like there's not going to be too many people that really want to take this journey. Since people want to go as small as possible, talking about earlier, and like build these really narrow solutions. And that's great, but it doesn't give you room to expand. You need to really know everything about the customer. And once you do that, then you've earned your right to kind of go adjacent to these other markets.
So what keep you awake? What are the biggest challenges you have?
Yeah, so I think our biggest challenge right now is just scaling the team. Like we need to continue to double our engineering and sales team basically every quarter. Hiring is always the biggest challenge, right?
Okay, for people on, on the show, listening to us, you are the second interviewee, and I want to ask, what is the biggest challenge? You said one more time, it's hard for me to, the biggest challenge is the talent. So we'll come back to this, big challenges.
Yeah.
But since we're on this topic, there's one thing I'm always curious about your take. There are a lot of people who said, well, AI can do software engineers. Myself or my kids or other people, maybe we shouldn't learn software engineer anymore. What's your take?
Listen, I think we're always going to have software engineers. It will just look very different. If we think about the last 20 years of programming, we started with these very low-level languages like C, where we're basically writing machine code, and it slowly gets more abstracted. Now we're writing very pretty components in React. I think that we'll continue to
We
push
went through
out
this journey for 50 years, right? Starting from punch card, assembly language, right? C, Java, you name it, right? So this is just continuation of that journey from your point of view.
Just a continuation. Like it's all about first principles. Like the thinking behind being a software engineer is always going to be the same. It's just we're going to have better tooling.
Let me just get straight to it. Do you think we would have more software engineers or less software engineers 5 years from now, 7 years from now? One reason to ask this question, your alum, Adam, right?
Yeah.
He's going to high school. Should he spend more time in software engineer, or should he scaling down? Should he scale down the investment?
Listen, I think actually my thesis in college was I ended up creating my own major before I dropped out. And the idea, a couple years ago, obviously now, they use AI is going to automate everything except self-expression. Ultimately, what we need to do is I think it becomes much more important the liberal arts. Yes, you have ChatGPT to write stuff, but you need to be able to figure out how do I, as a human, synthesize information and be able to use the inputs and outputs I have to generate the right path.
So you still need to be your own quarterback in some ways, right? You have all the information. You have to be your own quarterback to synthesize everything. You still, the self-expression. The humans still have that job to do.
Yeah, right. Since if we think about the best software engineers we both worked with in our careers, they're not writing that much code right now. What they're doing is they're thinking about how they architect this system, and maybe then they write 10 lines of code, but it actually takes them 2 or 3 weeks to figure out what the correct 10 lines are. We're just going to see much more leverage. And what we've seen across the board is every time the cost to produce software comes down, there's going to be more software. So I don't think that we're going to see fewer engineers. I think we'll see much better software for much more use cases, but the engineer will have much more leverage. So it'll be maybe 1 engineer is equal to 100 of before.
Wait a second. We need more software engineering currency resource for sure, right? I totally buy that. But in terms of the number of software engineers, are we going to have less or more 5 years from now?
We're going to see more still.
You still believe
I still believe we're going to see more, but I think there will be so much more productive. Like maybe we see 20% more, but it's 100x the output of that.
Interesting. So I was just reading this article, someone talking about, hey, what the person was impressed of from the level 8 or 9 at Facebook Meta, right? The person said that they are the better writer, they are the better, express, they are able to express things better. So very much, in alignment with what the article was saying. Before we go back to the challenging part, what other advices you have for your Pinewood alum?
Yes, I have a lot of advice for Pinewood alum, or really anyone that's looking to start out.
Everyone, basically.
Everyone. I think what you want to do is you want to be a very narrow and one focus. So people talk about being well-rounded. Yes, you do want to figure out, you need to be well-rounded, you need to have a good idea, but you want to go very deep in one specific area. Think about how can I be the top 1% in this one narrow thing, and once you start doing that and going deep, you'll have all these different opportunities to start opening yourself onto.
Very interesting. So instead of trying to be to learn very broad things, are you saying that better at one thing, laser focus?
I think laser focus is like how you truly become great. And then you want to become great at one thing and make sure it's just passion. It doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's art, if it's nuclear physics. You should become laser focused on it, try to get as good as possible, and then through there you'll kind of be able to explore and figure out other things that interest in you.
Cool. This is a very good advice. Once you get off the camera, I would love
Yeah.
to have you and Adam talk more about it, because he's a few months away from getting to the high school and the next 4 years, right? How should he spend more time? Would love to get some mentorship from you to him.
Let's definitely do it. But yeah, ultimately, like, you want to be spiky, right? Like, it's overrated to be well-rounded. Like, you end up being a master of none. If you're going to be super well-rounded, just figure out what's something you like, just go really deep in it, and like, it's okay to have spikes. Spikes are interesting.
Yeah, master of something rather than master of none.
Yeah.
Okay, so great. What other challenges you have as an entrepreneur today as a founder, CEO of Latin?
Yeah. So I was like, we'll talk a bit about the hiring, then we'll talk about some other problems too. The main thing about obviously hiring, what we try and do is try and figure out how do we build exceptional teams. And from that, it's about making sure that everyone works cohesively. So like before this, I was a rower. And one of the things that we do when you row is you put 2 people in a boat to figure out the top boats. So you have 2 8 boats. You swap one person, and then you keep racing and racing until one boat keeps consistently winning. And what I figured out while I was doing this is when you swap one person to the other boat, the conventional wisdom they try to do is they try to pull really hard. They try to go as hard as possible. But it starts to mess up the rhythm of the other 8 people.
Interesting.
So like how you end up winning is when you swap into the other boat, even though it's one person, you want to synchronize, you want to row in the same direction and focus on how do I make the individual better. And that's kind of what we're looking for as we expand the team, where obviously everyone needs to be exceptional, but we can't have people, especially as a small team, that only focus on their individual output. It's about how do we row in the same direction, make sure that we're synchronized and all working to lift each other up.
Very interesting. You started, at age 13 as an entrepreneur. You did a start. You were part of a startup, right? You started your own company. When did you have that conviction, or aha moment?
Yeah, I think like the aha moment to start the company was I realized a lot of other people were having this problem.
Oh, I was talking about aha moment that the synchronous thing is.
Oh,
is
the
such
synchronous
a
thing. Yeah, I mean, it's what really comes from just looking at high-performing teams. It doesn't matter really what you're doing. We go further when we go together.
Did you have that conviction the day you started at Latin?
Oh, 100% had that
100%.
conviction.
So you learned that over, before starting Latin.
Yeah,
so
learned that
when you
before
building out, when you build out this team, you kind of pay very close attention to this team fit, culture fit, or rhythm fit.
I think culture fit is very underrated, especially
Underrated.
At the start.
Wow.
Like people try to get the best people they can. I think that's correct. But if they're not all meshed together, there's so much friction that enables. Like we've all worked with people in the past who are just exceptionally brilliant, but they clash with the team. And ultimately that causes friction. When we have friction, we move slower. So what we'll do is like anyone when we interview can veto someone. And if they think that they're not a good fit, it's no questions asked, and then we move on. And what that ends up being is you have these people that can work really well together. Now, you don't want it to be homogenous. It still ends up being a lot of diverse perspectives. Everyone's very different, but everyone's on the same page.
So despite that, I'm pretty sure, how long you have been doing this company? 3 years?
3 years now, yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that despite you have that conviction, you are paying close attention to the team fit, culture fit, you probably still made a mistake.
Yeah.
What did you learn from the mistake?
The main mistakes we always learn is it's not only the right person, right culture fit, but also the right time at the company. Like right now, it's not for everyone. Like, we're 15 people right now. Things are disorganized. It's really hard. They're long hours. Some people, they'd be phenomenal leaders when we're 200 people, but they just aren't ready to operate without any structure or systems in place. And it's nothing against them. It's just about the stage of the company. Some of the folks when we were, 3 people, now it's a very different skill set from like everyone's working at anything to now we have to start specializing. And maybe they preferred just to go really kind of all around and they don't like the specialization. So it's about not only personality and skill fit, but also stage of the company.
Stage fit, right?
Yeah.
So team fit, culture fit, and a stage fit. That's so true, right? I remember this was probably more than 10 years ago. I hired a superstar to my startup,
Yeah.
And I thought like this is such a great fit, right? Technology, everything. But then you realize, right? For at his stage of the career, family.
Yeah.
there's misalignment, right? So I learned in the hard way myself. So I think, when I ask you what's the challenges, one is the hiring good talent, but the other thing is the building out the team. So before, you and I, came to this room for this session, one of the investors, heard about, hey, David is going to talk to you. And he said, you need to grill David. Like, what's under the hood? I know he's talking about wonderful stuff, but I don't know what's under the hood.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
So what I got from you is under the hood is not just technology part, right? But also how you build a team, your sort of the culture, your kind of empathy in this sales tech. Not just in the last 3 years, but for so many years, starting from your manual security days, right? That's sort of, to me, under the hood, it's more than just technology, right? Now, just so that for me to get my homework done, anything else you can tell me that I can pass along to this investor? Hey, David told me this is exciting, so.
Listen, I can tell you something that, but I actually want to tell you, like, our philosophy of building software. I think software is a lot closer to art than people think. Like, especially as we see that it becomes much easier to build, aesthetics and how you build it matter a lot more. Like, but you might not know this, before this I was actually in art school. So like, I did software engineering, but also was trying to do studio art. And I was thinking about going down that path. What happens in software is people don't sweat the little things. It's about the little details, it's about the little actions.
Yep.
And it's a lot of things that are just very thoughtful that end up being a 10x better experience. And that comes from as you're designing this entire system, right? Like, we started from first principles building this company. It's all about the data. And then from there, all right, we need to apply the AI. And then after that, when you go to the application layer, yeah, these tools are going to be much smarter because we have the data and AI. But how do we make them beautiful and delightful to use? And that's just a very big design.
I think
user
what
empathy
you're
problem.
basically telling me that is I'm building this data company, AI company, SaaS companies. On the surface, it may look the same to the stories being told by 20 other entrepreneurs, but the devil's in the detail, right? And give me an example, concrete example. I did this, right? There's a subtle thing, 10x better.
Yeah. So I think a good example of that, obviously we have a phenomenal design team too, is how we're able to go multi-product so early. Since obviously think about it, we're a small team. Like having multiple products to sell.
Okay.
Right, so I talked about the wedge product, obviously having 2 and 3 out. It's actually a design problem more than it's just an engineering problem.
Why?
Since you have to figure out, obviously when you're building with components, there's somewhat like Lego blocks. You have to be able to swap them in and out. How do we use the same components for every single product? So it's easy for the user to adopt, but also really easy for us to build. And it's like the most unintuitive part about building this company is each product we build, it's actually faster, not slower, because there's so many shared components and ideas. Like a concrete example is the average sales app has a concept of accounts, opportunities, leads, contacts. So we get to reuse that concept in every single product we build, so we don't have to build it again. So it ends up being a very interesting design problem of we're trying to help you better engage your customers.
So you are saying that by the time you build your 10th product features, it would take 1/10 of the effort. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. The effort actually decreases kind of exponentially since we can just keep snapping in all of these same components.
Okay, so let me still challenge you. So why other people cannot just claim the same thing, right? I'm building a platform, first the 5 features takes me a lot of time, but next the 5 features are a lot easier because I'm leveraging, like what's unique, or what's interesting?
So what's really interesting is it comes back to obviously down to the data and starting from this data first approach. Most people, these SaaS tools the last 20 years, they're very narrow and they just don't have the ambition to go multi-product. And that has to be a decision you make from the first day you start the company, since it changes how you build everything. We think about like something like a support desk. Their goal is to integrate with as few pieces of software as possible. And that's been every piece of software, right? Since more integrations adds more complexity. So we started saying, no, that's wrong. We're gonna integrate with every single piece of thing we can. And once you start with that and you have the muscle of building early, it changes kind of how everything fits in. Since we build this with the idea of saying there's going to be 10 more things next to it.
You solve the harder problem first, right? Kind of you don't just take shortcut. And then by not taking the shortcut, you're actually taking the shortcut for the broader system, right?
Exactly, taking shortcut for the broader system. And you can't, some things you make in the company are irreversible. Like you need that in your DNA from the first day you start. Since then, if you're operating that principle, everything you do afterward changes. You architect your systems much differently. You build things and design them in a completely different way. Like, it's a decision that you have to make on day one to go wide. It can't be a later thought.
So to my friend, the investor who wanted me to come and grill you, my answer by listening to you is, you from day one you build up this future-proof, right, data platform. You didn't take the shortcut, right? And then by now, compared to maybe gazillion competitors you already have, it's a lot easier for you to build the next feature than some other people. Fantastic. It's such a great conversation, and I really enjoy the conversation. And one statement, I heard so many great statements. One thing was this: culture fit is such an underrated thing. Frankly speaking, I underestimated the culture fit early in my career as well. But after going through so much more, I completely agree with you. The culture fit is underrated still today. Thank you for coming to Byte into
appreciate
Future.
It, Howie.
And for people watching our show, Byte into Future, one thing that David was building, has been building is this a software stack, future-proof, right? So I learned a lot. Hopefully you also learned a lot. Thank you for watching.